Hi everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. So I hope that everyone has had like a really good week and a good day thus far. When I make these videos, oftentimes it's because I've noticed certain things, and specifically in the church, which is why I sometimes bring these topics up. And the reason being is because as Christians, we are called to a different standard. We are called to a higher standard. And what really gets to me the most is when people are treated differently. So, I've noticed this thing where sometimes we allow people with money and power or just general influence to do the craziest things and to say the craziest things without righteous criticism because they have that money and or influence. And we sometimes allow this in various environments, like I mentioned, the church environment. Sometimes it's within families. For example, if you have like an aunt that's like really rich, and maybe the aunt is just very rude or condescending, etc. But then we allow the people to continue on doing those things, or someone tells you, no, you can't say that to that person. You can't address this thing that they're doing wrong, but they are Christian and they claim to be Christian, right? But then, on the other hand, you think nothing, or we think nothing of the person with less money and influence. So there's this scale that is being used in our own minds and in our own hearts regarding the value of different people. And like I said earlier, this happens sometimes in the family, and I gave that example. But it's the same in the church. And we allow these things for our own self-gain, oftentimes, or because we don't want any sort of ructions. And maybe it's the pastor, or maybe it's someone with a more influence within the church. Or perhaps it's just people in the church who have money and who you feel like, okay, you can't actually say something about because of the fact that they have that influence or they have that money. And what this also means is that sometimes we forgive those people with influence or forgive those people with money more or quicker than those without. And I just want to go to a few scripture verses that highlight this a bit for me. And it's quite telling to how the Lord sees people with these different sorts of resources. So I'm going to go to James chapter 2 verse 5. I'm just going to read that verse. You can read the whole chapter, but I'm just going to highlight this particular verse. So it says, "Listen, my dear brothers, has not God chosen those who are poor in the eyes of the world to be rich in faith and to inherit the kingdom he promised those who love him?" And verse 6, "But you have insulted the poor. It is not the rich who are exploiting you. Are they not the ones who are dragging you into court?" Now I'm just going to stop there, but clearly there were some issues happening here in the church at the time where there was this idea of rich people or people who had money and possibly influence as well. And there was a difference with how the people saw them compared to how the people saw, those who were poor. There was favoritism to the opposite side. And then this person brings up to say, but aren't the rich people the people who are dragging you down or who are being terrible to you? Why would you have the favoritism towards them when they are the ones treating you a certain way, right? But obviously this is what was happening during the time. And I'm not saying you must hate people who are rich. Please don't misunderstand. I'm just saying that there is favoritism in terms of how people value those people, how people see people with regards to resources. So, okay, I'm gonna read you another piece of scripture, and I'm gonna go to Leviticus 19, verse 15. So, what it says is this: "Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly." And that for me is obviously key, because I think we tend to do this thing where we treat people unfairly based on what they have. Now, it's different if people's characters are like not okay, right? If they're rude or if they don't always have the best intentions. It's different. Just because the person is poor and they have those intentions doesn't mean you're not supposed to address that. But more so in terms of the favoritism that we show people who have money and influence. So for me, the biggest problem with this is that by doing that sort of favoritism or showing different behaviors to these people because they have different resources or have a lot of money or don't have a lot of money. It shows something within our hearts that we have established and placed a different intrinsic value on different people based on how much money or influence they have. And when I say intrinsic, I mean the value by being a person here on earth. And by doing so, we think that we have the authority to do it. We have the authority to place that value or lack thereof on people based on whatever we are seeing and what we feel like is more important. But we can't do that. We do not have that authority. And God does. And God says that we are all equal, right, to Him. He loves us all equally. And He does not say one person is more intrinsically valuable to Him than another simply because that person has money or not. And when we do that, it is the carnal nature within us. When we do that is highlighted within us. And what it does is it actually makes a mockery of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Because He obviously died for everyone, not just the rich people or not just the poor people for that matter, but for everyone. And we need to allow Him to change our hearts regarding this because it is an abomination to God. Now, I've seen people who preach on the poverty gospel and who say that people must be poor, you shouldn't value money too much and all of that. And I don't think that you should worship money, and as you'll see in a previous video that I've made. However, it's a tool that can be used, right? You shouldn't abuse it. And I think that's the problem there. Not that money in itself is the problem. But those very people will still then highly regard people with money or people with influence. And then when it comes to poorer people, perhaps you overdoing it in a sense where you say, or where you feel that you should treat these people extremely different and you just allow them to do whatever. So there is the opposite of that as well in terms of favoritism. But this is something that I've noticed in the church with many people. And for me, it really is, it's a pressing thing for me because I can't take it when people look down on other people simply because of what they have in terms of money. And, you can say sometimes in church that, or try to pretend that doesn't happen, but the mere fact that people tell you, no, you can't tell this person something, but you can tell this person something, or be critical towards this person because they are poor, means that speaks to what the different value that you place on those individuals. But I just want, I just wanted to bring this to your attention because, like I said, I've noticed this in the church and it has really irked me and annoyed me, especially when you look at who Jesus preached to and we spoke to most of the time. Now, not to say that He never spoke to obviously the rich people, but He obviously addressed a lot of poor people as well. And that for me is key, but it's also for me something that is very important to note. But anyway, may God give us wisdom and willingness to change in this area, to allow Him to open up our eyes to see that people have the same intrinsic value, and that just because they are poor doesn't mean we can just ask them to do whatever and just speak to them a certain way. That doesn't make sense. That is actually disgusting to do that. So I pray that God really opens up our eyes to that and allows us for our hearts to be changed in that regard. But anyway, guys, I hope that this bless you. I hope this has encouraged you, and I hope that you have a great day further. I hope that you can have a great week further, and God bless.